Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're heading to Paris. Well, not literally, but we're going to be spending some time in late 19th century Paris, exploring a period of incredible artistic innovation. We're diving into the world of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism.
Yes. Two movements that really did redefine how we see the world. It's amazing to think about how those artists, living in a time of such dramatic change, chose to capture not just what they saw, but, like how they felt about it.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. First, a little scene setting. It's the
Yeah.
late 1800s in Paris, a time of incredible change, industrialization, a real whirlwind of new ideas and technologies. And in the middle of all this, you have these artists just breaking away from the super traditional, very rigid rules of academic art.
Right. They were like, forget the rules.
Yeah, and that's where the Impressionists come in. They were obsessed with capturing, well, impressions, those fleeting moments, the way light plays on a subject, those little glimpses of everyday life,
Mm.
you know.
It wasn't just about, creating a pretty picture,
Yeah.
right? It was about a whole new way of seeing. They were like, let's focus on light and color and movement.
Okay, so how did they do that?
Yeah.
How did they actually change the way they were painting?
Well, instead of all that meticulous detail that was popular at the time, they started using bold, visible brushstrokes, almost like these dabs of pure color,
Yeah.
to kind of create this impression of light and movement, almost like painting with light itself.
I see. So it's not about perfectly blending and smoothing everything out. It's more about capturing the essence of the scene through these little, explosions of color.
Exactly.
Think of Monet and his water lilies, sitting there by his pond at Giverny, capturing the same scene but at different times of day, showing how the light transforms everything.
Exactly. He was obsessed with capturing those subtle shifts in light and atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
And those bold, broken brushstrokes, they really create this sense of vibrancy and movement that pulls you right into the scene.
You're not just looking at it. You're experiencing it, You're right there.
Right.
But then along comes Post-Impressionism. And it's not that they completely rejected Impressionism. It's more like, okay, so we can capture these fleeting moments. Now what?
It's like a reaction, a rethinking of what art could be.
So what were they trying to do?
They were still interested in light and color, but they wanted to go deeper, explore more than just, the surface, the fleeting moment.
Okay, so they were looking for something more lasting,
Yeah.
more impactful.
Yeah, exactly. They wanted to express emotions, delve into the psychological, explore personal interpretations of the world.
So it was less about faithfully representing the external world and more about expressing their own internal world.
Exactly. Think of Van Gogh's Starry Night, those swirling, almost turbulent brushstrokes conveying his inner turmoil. It's a world away from Monet's serene water lilies, wouldn't you say?
It's interesting, too, because they're both using those same techniques, those bold colors and visible brushstrokes, but they're using them to achieve such different effects.
Exactly. That's what makes this period so fascinating. And it wasn't just Van Gogh. There was Cézanne, for example, who was kind of obsessed with form and structure. He took those impressionist techniques and used them to deconstruct reality, like breaking objects down into these basic geometric shapes.
Yeah, I remember learning about that.
Yeah.
He said he wanted to treat nature by the cylinder, the sphere, the cone.
Yeah. He was really searching for the underlying architecture of the world, He wanted to create something solid, something that captured the essence of an object beyond just its appearance.
So we got Monet capturing the fleeting nature of light, Van Gogh pouring his emotions onto the canvas, and Cézanne deconstructing the world into these fundamental forms. They're all asking the same question. What is the relationship between art and reality?
And that's the key question, right? And answering it in such radically different ways.
Yeah. But then what unites them all is this desire to, push boundaries, to explore, to break free from tradition, and to find new ways of seeing and representing the world.
And they really did change the course of our history. It was a moment of incredible experimentation.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of how these movements are connected but also distinct. But how can we really grasp those key differences? How can we tell an Impressionist painting from a Post-Impressionist painting?
Let's try this. Imagine you've got two artists, an Impressionist and a Post-Impressionist, and they're standing side by side, looking at the same scene.
Okay, I can picture it. What happens next?
Well, the Impressionists might say something like, wow, look at the way the light is hitting those trees. I want to capture this exact moment, the movement, the shimmer, the feeling of the light.
Right.
But the Post-Impressionists, they might say, yeah, the light is beautiful, but I want to go deeper. What's the emotion I feel looking at this? What's the story this scene is telling me?
So the Impressionist is focused on the external, the sensory experience,
Right.
while the Post-Impressionist is delving into the internal, the emotional, the psychological.
Precisely.
But both are valid approaches to art.
No, absolutely. And that leads to such different results. Think about Renoir, for example. His paintings of Parisian life. All those lively scenes of cafes and dance halls full of light and movement.
Right, like you can almost hear the music and the laughter,
Yeah.
feel the warmth of the sun on your skin.
Exactly. It's like a celebration of everyday life, captured in all its fleeting beauty.
But then take a look at Van Gogh's self-portraits, for instance.
Mm.
You see the same vibrant palette, those incredible colors. But the brushstrokes, they're totally different. Thicker, more swirling, like they're conveying something so much more intense, a raw emotion that's almost palpable.
Exactly. And that's a hallmark of post-impressionism, right? They weren't afraid to be expressive, to use color and line to convey their inner world.
So they weren't just depicting the world, they were interpreting it, expressing their own unique perception of it.
Precisely.
This is a great foundation.
Hmm.
And I'm already starting to see how both movements share this desire to break away from tradition and like really explore new ways of seeing and representing the world. But how did that actually play out in practice? What specific techniques do they actually use to achieve these effects?
Well, for that, we need to look at their techniques in more detail. So let's start with the Impressionists and their revolutionary approach to light and color.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so we were starting to get into the nitty-gritty of these techniques that made Impressionism and Post-Impressionism so groundbreaking.
Yeah, they really were game changers.
For sure. So let's dive into the specifics, starting with the Impressionists. What was it about their approach to light and color that was so different, so revolutionary?
Well, you see, before Impressionism, artists would typically mix their colors on their palettes beforehand, right?
Okay, so like trying to get the perfect shade of green before they even touch the canvas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. They would blend and smooth everything out to get these like perfect transitions between colors. But the Impressionists, they just threw that whole idea out the window.
Really? How so?
Instead of pre-mixing, they started putting pure unmixed colors, like straight from the tube, side by side directly on the canvas.
Whoa, so like instead of mixing a muted green for a patch of grass, they put a dab of blue next to a dab of yellow and let our eyes do the blending.
Exactly. And you know, it created this incredible sense of vibrancy, like almost a shimmering effect, because they were capturing the way light actually works, the way it breaks down into all these different colors.
Oh, I see. So it's like they were painting with light itself instead of trying to like recreate the illusion of light with pre-mixed colors. They were using the actual colors of light to create the image.
Exactly. It was a total departure from the way things were done before, and it allowed them to capture those fleeting effects of light that were so important to them, you know, the way colors shimmer and change in different conditions.
So it wasn't about being accurate in a photographic sense. It was about being like perceptually accurate.
Yeah, it was about capturing how we actually see light and color in the world. And a perfect example of this is Monet's Impression, Sunrise, you know, the painting that actually gave Impressionism its name.
Oh yeah, of course.
Well, the sun in that painting, it's this hazy orange disc, almost like it's dissolving into the blues and pinks of the sky. It's all about capturing that fleeting moment, the feeling of the sunrise.
Right. It's like a snapshot of a moment in time.
Mhm.
Okay, and what about those brushstrokes? You know, those short, broken strokes. They're so distinctive, like little commas of color. What were they doing with those?
Ah, the brushstrokes, another hallmark of Impressionism. They completely abandon those smooth, blended strokes that were, you know, all about concealing the artist's hand.
Right, like trying to make it look like a machine painted it instead of a human.
Yeah, exactly. But the Impressionists, they wanted to celebrate the artist's hand. They wanted to show the process, the energy, the movement of painting, so they embraced the visible brushstroke, using it to convey, you know, energy, movement, the very act of creation.
It's like they're saying, hey, look, this is a painting. I'm an artist, and I'm here to show you my unique vision.
Exactly. It was about celebrating their individual way of seeing and experiencing the world. And, you know, it really paved the way for the even more expressive techniques we see in Post-Impressionism.
Okay, so let's shift gears to Post-Impressionism now. They definitely took those innovations in color and light and ran with them, but they did it in their own way, right? So what were some of the key differences in their techniques?
Well, the Impressionists were really focused on capturing that fleeting moment, that impression of a scene. But the Post-Impressionists, they were more interested in exploring something more enduring, more lasting.
Okay, so it wasn't just about recording what they saw. It was about using those techniques to explore deeper ideas.
Exactly. Things like emotions, psychological states, even spiritual themes. It was about expressing a personal vision.
And we already talked about Van Gogh and those incredibly expressive brushstrokes of his. It's like he's channeling his emotions directly onto the canvas.
Oh, absolutely. And a great example of that is his painting, The Starry Night. Those swirling, almost violent brushstrokes, they're not just depicting a night sky, right?
Yeah, it's like the sky is alive.
Right. They're conveying an emotion, a sense of awe and wonder, but also this really intense, almost agonizing feeling.
It's like you could feel his inner turmoil in those brushstrokes.
Exactly. Van Gogh, he used color and line not just to describe what he saw, but to express what he felt. He even wrote a lot about color theory, about how he wanted to use color to express himself forcibly.
It's amazing how he was able to translate those really intense emotions into visual form. When you look at his paintings, it's like you're really getting a glimpse into his soul.
Right. And that's the amazing thing about art, isn't it? That ability to connect with another human being on such a deep level, even across centuries.
It really is powerful. But Post-Impressionism wasn't all about emotion, right? There was also Cézanne and his obsession with form and structure. What is he doing differently with his brushstrokes?
Oh, Cézanne is a fascinating one. He really admired the Impressionists, but he felt that their work lacked a certain solidity, like a sense of permanence.
So it was almost too fleeting for him.
Yeah, he wanted to capture the underlying structure of the world, the way objects exist in space. So he developed this technique of using these short parallel brushstrokes, almost like building blocks, to construct his forms.
So if Van Gogh's brushstrokes were like these swirling emotions, Cézanne's were more like architectural blueprints, carefully constructing his vision of reality.
Precisely. And a good example of this is his still lifes. He wasn't just painting apples and oranges, he was exploring the geometry of form, the way light and shadow define volume.
It's like he's sculpting with paint.
Right. And those short parallel strokes, they create this sense of texture of weight that's so different from the Impressionists' ethereal, almost shimmering brushwork.
Yeah, you could almost feel the weight of those apples and oranges. Like you could reach out and touch them.
And he even said once that he wanted to make of Impressionism something solid and durable, like the art of the museums.
Interesting. It's like he was building a bridge between the fleeting impressions of the Impressionists and the more abstract art that was to come later.
Exactly.
So we've gone from Monet capturing the shimmer of light on water lilies to Van Gogh expressing his soul through these swirling brushstrokes to Cézanne building these solid forms with carefully placed strokes. It's amazing to see how all of these techniques, so different on the surface, grew out of the same desire to break from tradition and explore new ways of seeing. But it makes me wonder, what did the public think of all this? Were people ready for this radical shift in art?
That's a great question. And it leads us to one of the most interesting parts of this whole period, the public's reaction to these groundbreaking movements.
Oh, I bet there was some controversy around it. Tell me all about it. Okay, so let's talk about the public's reaction to all this. These artists were pushing boundaries, experimenting, basically turning the art world upside down. Were people, ready for such a radical shift in art?
Well, imagine, right? Imagine yourself walking into a gallery back then in the late 1800s. You're expecting to see those, traditional landscapes and portraits, everything perfectly rendered, super realistic.
Right, like those huge historical paintings you see in museums.
Exactly. But then you walk in and bam, you're hit with these impressionist paintings. Blurry figures, dabs of pure color, brush strokes that look almost frantic.
Yeah, it must have been pretty jarring.
Oh, it totally was. People didn't know what to make of it. The early impressionist exhibitions, they were met with a mix of ridicule and outrage. Critics called their work unfinished, childish. Some even said it was scandalous.
Oh, wow, so they really weren't embraced right away.
Not at all. One critic even said that Monet's Impression Sunrise looked more like, get this, wallpaper in its embryonic state than a finished painting.
Ouch. I mean, these artists were pouring their hearts and souls into their work, trying to capture something new, something beautiful.
They were true pioneers, and, pioneers often face resistance. But here's the thing, even with all that negativity, there were people who saw something special in this new art.
So some people got it.
Yeah. They were drawn to the vibrancy, the energy, the way these paintings captured the feeling of modern life.
So it wasn't an overnight success story, more like a slow burn.
Exactly. It took time for people to adjust their eyes to really see what these artists were doing. But little by little, Impressionism started to gain acceptance and then admiration. And eventually, well, it became one of the most beloved and influential art movements in history.
That's amazing. What about the Post-Impressionists, though? Did they face the same kind of pushback?
Well, in a way, yes. But because they were, building on what the Impressionists had already done, they weren't quite as shocking to the public. But they were still pushing those boundaries, exploring new artistic territories.
Right, like Van Gogh. It's crazy to think that his work is now considered to be some of the most important art ever created.
I know, right? But back then, a lot of people just didn't get it. They thought his work was too intense, too emotional.
Well, it just goes to show how taste evolves, right?
Yeah.
How what might seem radical or strange in one era can become, like, totally cherished in another.
That's so true. And it really highlights how important it is for artists to stay true to their own vision, even when it's not popular, even when it's challenging.
Right? It's about believing in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that conviction, that passion, it really shines through in their work. It's inspiring.
It makes me think about how important it is to, stay true to your own creative voice, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't fit the mold. Exactly. And, the impact of these movements goes way beyond just the art world. They really influenced how people saw the world, how they perceived beauty, how they experienced everyday life.
Yeah, let's talk about that legacy. We've touched on it a little bit throughout our deep dive, but
Yes.
what would you say is like the most enduring impact of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism?
I think their biggest contribution was the freedom they brought to art. They broke free from all those constraints of realism, and that really paved the way for so many other movements. Abstract art, expressionism, all the amazing and diverse art forms we see today.
Yeah, they showed the world that art doesn't have to be just a mirror reflecting reality.
Right.
It can be a window,
Right.
a window into the artist's soul, a reflection of their emotions, their unique vision, their way of experiencing the world.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective, it really rippled out into other areas of culture as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You see echoes of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism and everything, music, literature, fashion, design.
That focus on capturing a feeling, on expressing yourself, on pushing boundaries, on breaking the rules.
Exactly. It's like they gave us permission to see the world differently, to appreciate beauty in the unexpected, to embrace subjectivity.
Wow. It's amazing to think that these two art movements, born in the cafes and studios of Paris, had such a profound and lasting impact, not just on art, but on our whole culture.
It really is. It just goes to show how powerful art can be. Its ability to inspire us, to challenge us, to change how we see the world and ourselves.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We explored the origins of these movements, their techniques, how the public reacted to them, and of course, their lasting impact.
We've done quite a deep dive.
We have. But there's always more to learn, more to explore.
Oh, always. That's the beauty of art, isn't it? It's a never-ending journey of exploration and discovery.
It really is. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. The next time you see a work of art, whether it's a painting, a sculpture, a piece of music, or even, just a beautiful sunset, take a moment to really see it. Don't just look at it, experience it. Ask yourself, what emotions does it evoke in you? What story is it telling? And how does it connect to this incredible history of art that we've been talking about today?
That's a wonderful thought to leave everyone with. Art is meant to be felt, experienced, pondered. So go out there, explore, and keep the conversation going.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, we'll say goodbye for now. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism.